All right, how's it going, y'all? Today, we're going to be going over top features to use on a Synology NAS for ransomware protection for businesses. And this is not even going to require you to use a Synology as your primary file server, though that is their original intent. This is going to be across the board just an add-on to businesses who have more traditional setups where you've got a Windows domain controller and maybe you're using Hyper-V for your virtual machine and things like that. And so all of these are actually going to be for both ransomware and just being able to recover from mix-ups and issues and things like that. And so if a server goes down, it's an easy way to get back up and running in multiple ways. Also, every single one of the features we're going to be talking about here is completely license free. The only exception to that is the majority of these features do require a Synology that is a plus model. So a lot of this you can't do with a J model or even just a straight non-plus model, but that is pretty much the only exception to this. And there also is one feature, immutable snapshots, that does require one of the more recent NASs. I think everything that is a 20 model and after, I think does have it, but I will pull up the compatibility list for that. And it's not fully required to really get the massive unlock, but we're going to be setting all of this up on a RS2423 Plus that Synology did send over to me. And I do get to keep it this time, which was great, but they do not get to review this video before it goes live, and I can say whatever I want here. So it's not sponsored by them or anything like that, though this is a NAS that I was sent for free because I asked. All right, so the very first one, which is honestly probably one of the best ones out there that does not require you to use Synology as your primary file server, is the Active Backup for Business suite. And we're going to start with just Active Backup for Business. And we're also going to touch on Active Backup for MS365 and Google Workspace because they are both great protections. All right, so first off, Active Backup for Business. And this is where you can do so much great stuff. We're going to mostly be structuring this as a more traditional business that doesn't necessarily have a Synology as their primary file server. So we're going to skip over the NAS section, but we're immediately going to see some of the best features out here, and that is the PC backup. I don't generally set this up for Macs. If you do have Macs and you want to back them up, you can, but in general, I'm still using Time Machine just as they're working some of this stuff out. But this right here is license-free, deduplicated, and compressed backups of pretty much unlimited Windows PCs on the network with the ability to do a bare metal restore. This is a really phenomenal feature, and there's kind of two sections of this that I do want to touch on. There is the physical server, and then there is the PC Mac section. So whenever you're setting up a PC, you can either choose it to be a physical server or as a PC. And they are similar but different. And you can actually upgrade a PC, a Windows PC, from being a PC in this case, to being a physical server. And the difference between the two is the physical server actually lets you do one of the best features on this list, and that is an instant restore to either the Synology itself, Hyper-V, or to VMware. So you can actually instantaneously restore this physical server to a virtual machine. And so if it crashes and you just need to get back up and running, you can actually restore it virtually, which is absolutely awesome, and I'm going to demo that here. The other section under physical server that also supports the same failover is Linux. And this does require a little bit older version of a kernel. So currently I run everything on Ubuntu 2020 LTS, and it actually allows for an instantaneous restore. So I actually use this on my other system where I am backing up my forum site and my website from AWS Lightsail. Every night they're getting backed up, and I can actually instantaneously restore either one of those to my NAS if I need to. And the next really great section that it does allow backups for is file servers. And this is great for a whole slew of cases. And this is where I was talking about, you don't need to use the NAS or your primary file server to unlock a lot of these great features. Because this right here is a phenomenal license-free backup of pretty much any SMB file server. So if you're using a QNAP or a Windows domain controller as your file server, I love setting these up because it is so easy to back those up, and you can just include them on in there. And if you ever need to restore a file, you can one-off restore a file, or you can restore the entire thing. It is so great to have. I would really recommend setting this up because honestly, Windows domain controllers are not that easy to back up the file servers in a really nice way. Here, it is very easy to do a backup of that you can go back to previous versions of files and be able to restore single one-off files and things like that make it very, very, very easy to do, all while not having to pay cloud costs. The next piece on our list right here is our virtual machine backups. And as I said, you could restore to VMware as well as Hyper-V. Here, you can also back those up, which is great. So this is really one of those under the radar features that is absolutely phenomenal. Here, you can add in as many virtual machines as you'd like and just connect the hypervisors directly, and Active Backup for Business will back up the virtual machines directly from the hypervisor, meaning you can go ahead and restore all of them and you don't have to pay those crazy Veeam license fees and things like that to back up your stuff. And the great thing is you can also restore these virtual machines to a different hypervisor. So if you upgrade your server, you can keep your old one set up as a target ready to restore your virtual machines to in the event that the new server fails. It's a great way to get some redundancy really easily. And I'm going to go ahead and just show now how I use this. So there's a whole bunch of options here, but whenever you got something set up as a physical server, it kind of has the same ability to be restored as a virtual machine, or bare metal, where you actually restore the disk itself. I'm going to go ahead and just show a case where this is my upload VM. I use this to upload videos because we've got horrible internet speed right here. And let's go ahead and say it shut down and dies. So I'm going to go ahead and remote into it. And I've got this set up as a backup. So now I'm going to go ahead and just shut it down. And let's just say the entire thing crashed, right? Well, it has a recent backup here. So the entire thing has crashed. We need to get this server back up and running. Say this is our domain controller, and now nobody is able to access the internet because your domain controller is down and it's running your DNS. Well, we can actually go ahead and actually restore it directly to the NAS right here. So I'm just going to come in here and hit restore, and we select what restore we want to do. If you had messed something up and you need to restore it from a previous version, you can do that here, or we can just do the most recent version. And now we've got those options. We could actually restore it to one of our hypervisors on site if we've got some that have extra power, or you can actually restore it to Virtual Machine Manager, as in on this NAS itself. We can instantaneously restore this as a virtual machine running on the NAS. Now, I have not upgraded the RAM in this thing. It came with 8 gig stock, so it's not going to be a great experience because Windows loves its RAM, but we can go ahead and do that. I've already set up Virtual Machine Manager, and now I get to choose where I would like to restore it to. So right now, I've got 2 volumes, an SSD and a hard drive volume. This is the SSD volume. This is the hard drive volume. The Active Backup for Business is currently stored on the hard drive volume, but let's go ahead and say, we probably want this on SSD, so we're going to restore it to the SSDs. And so it is going to take a little bit longer because it's got to import on in, but I overall think it's probably worth the extra 5-10 minutes of downtime because we will have a much faster experience, especially since we're going to give it like 5 gigs of RAM, so it's going to be swapping. So we're going to give it 5 gigs of RAM and just instantaneously restore it. We can go ahead and create our virtual disk here, and this is all just what it was set up on my other system. We choose the network interface that it is set up with. We can also specify the exact MAC address that it's got. So we can actually make it the same MAC address so it pulls the same DHCP reservation if it is on there. Now, obviously, if you had a static IP address assigned within Windows, this would be not important. I'm not going to go ahead and do it now just because I don't feel like looking it up, but we could do that and you would be able to set the correct MAC address. And just for now, I'm going to skip adding the VM tools just because we're trying to get this thing up and running ASAP. We'll say auto start yes, this is critical for us, and just go. We're going to go ahead and power on the virtual machine after creation. Now it is going to have to migrate those 60 gigs of data from the hard drives to the SSDs. This is 2 RAID 5 setups. So we should be pretty quick to go across between the two of them, but we will go ahead and see that. I'm just going to go ahead and see our resource manager. Yeah, so it's scooting along pretty well. So it really should not take too long. We are looking like we are hard drive limited between the transfers across the 2 units. So you can see Right here, this is the hard drive volume and then the SSD volume. Very different utilizations for the exact same throughput. Now, if we go back into our virtual machine, we're seeing the import status. And so because we went from the hard drive volume to the SSD volume, we are actually having to import it. When I did this earlier, just to make sure everything was good, I actually kept it on the hard drive volume, and the import process took seconds. So it really does come down to, if it doesn't have to move the data across, that format that's actually storing the backed up data in can be read without major modification by Virtual Machine Manager. And so it can be an incredibly fast restore in getting back up and running, especially if we just always had this on SSDs. Now, one thing that is going to happen is I gave it 5 gigs of RAM, so we're only going to have 3 gigs of RAM left over. So we're going to have very high RAM utilization here. All right, now, for whatever reason, it did not auto start. So we're just going to hit power on. And we can go ahead and connect into it. It is booting on up right now. And so we will have this back up and running in a minute here. And wow, it's not going to be a great experience, especially if we only gave it 5 gigs of RAM. Windows likes a lot more normally. It's running. And so this is such a great thing to have for something like a domain controller, where, you know, the difference between slow and non-existent is massive. So this is just one of those features that is super nice to have, where you can get back up and running really quickly and not have to worry about major downtime. And boom, just like that, we are logging in here. And voila, we are back up and running on the network, ready to go. And so if we need to, we can set the IP address right or anything like that, but we're up and running. So that is a huge benefit to have, where we are able to so quickly restore these things. And so you're not down for days trying to get new hardware and things like that. You can be back up. And I mean, this was a live demo where I even moved it across pools and probably took maybe 10 minutes to boot from the time that I said, all right, we got to switch over. So that is one of those things that is incredibly useful to have, that you can kind of forget about until you need, and then it is there. And this exact same process also works with the Linux server as well as the virtual machines. So if you choose any of the other methods, physical server, virtual machines, as well as the Linux server, all have the same ability to be instantaneously restored. We can actually see here that it automatically generated itself as a new task, because Active Backup for Business just immediately relinked because it's now got a new IP address. So that is just where it is so easy to set this stuff on up. And then when we get back up and running, we can just move everything back to the new setup. Or if it's something like a domain and you've not made any changes, you can actually just restore it from backup again. So now I'm going to go ahead and just force shut this thing on down. And so that way we don't have to worry. And we can just delete it. All right, and so that right there is probably one of the best features for small businesses, because what I just did there, if you've ever talked to any company that does this and sells a license, would have probably been $15K in hardware costs and reoccurring license fees in the thousands a year. A lot of companies make a lot of money by selling backup software like that. And this is one of those things that you can just really protect yourself from ransomware or just hardware failure with Active Backup for Business. I highly recommend every business, especially if you're running virtual machines and have servers that really need to be running, check out Active Backup for Business, because so many ways it can save you serious amounts of money. All right, and so now we'll go ahead and complete the trio for the Active Backup for Business and talk about Google Workspace and MS365, because these kind of do the exact same thing, just for Google Workspace and for MS365. And these are pretty simple. These allow you to back up your entire Google Workspace account or your entire MS365 for your entire company. For MS365, it supports Teams, it supports SharePoint. I hate SharePoint, but it supports it. Email, calendar, everything. So it'll pretty much back up the entirety of all of your users' profiles, all their emails, everything to the NAS. And you are actually able to create a portal where they can restore their own stuff, or only you can restore it. You can set up to very easily keep all versions forever, or just for 10 years or something like that. So if somebody leaves the company, you can delete their account and still recover their emails should it ever come up in the future. Google Workspace, the exact same thing. Their Drive, everything gets backed up. And these are really great features because they allow anything to happen to your domain. They allow somebody to impersonate you and delete your entire account and get back up and running. It is something that's so nice because it is physically separated from your account. So even if somebody comes in and does whatever to delete your account, remove all access, anything like that, and Google doesn't have a backup, you do. And that is separated out where they will not have access to delete this because it is also separated out. And I'm going to show that in a minute here. So both of these, while they are useful for ransomware, where they really are useful is just being able to recover files and be able to grab stuff without having to spend a ton of time trying to go through Google. And you can also do this for accounts you no longer want to pay for. So both of these are very, very useful to deploy for businesses because once again, they are license free. And if you've ever contacted somebody trying to back up your MS365 account, you know how expensive that can be. All right, so next up, this is probably the single best feature for preventing ransomware across anything. And this works regardless of if you use the Synology as your primary file server or not. It is snapshot replication and immutable snapshots. This is a feature. The immutable snapshots allow you to undo anything anybody does with no way of even somebody with an admin credential being able to delete them. Snapshots already are phenomenal for ransomware because they allow somebody to get a crypto virus on their computer and have it encrypt every single file it has access to. And you can recover that without going to backups at all. You should definitely have backups, but backups take time to restore. Snapshots allow you to roll back time on a file server nearly instantaneously because of the way snapshots work. If you want to revert 20 terabytes of changes, you don't have to move more than a couple of megabytes because of the way snapshots work. And so that's one of those reasons why, even if you do have an ironclad backup, you should still be having snapshots because you can have them way more often and the ability to restore them is going to be far faster than any other backup methodology out there because the data does not have to move. It's already there. All you have to do is update the pointers. And so let's go ahead and just demo this right now. So we've got this folder called Cloud Backup, and we can see I've been having snapshots. But let's go ahead and I'm going to set these snapshots up to be even stronger. We're going to have them every 2 hours, or actually we'll do every hour because we're a business. We're going to do every hour between 8 and 8. So while people are in the office, we're going to be having a snapshot every hour. Then this right here is our feature called immutable snapshots that will allow us to undo anything. Even if somebody is logged in as an administrator, just like I am right now, they cannot delete these for 7 days. And so that means if somebody compromises your domain controller, they still cannot fully delete your on-site replications or your snapshots. And so it is phenomenal for both backing up and just ensuring that you keep going no matter what. And so let's go ahead and just set up a basic retention policy. We're going to keep those hourly versions for 14 days. And remember, we also have them immutable for the first 7 days, but after that, an administrator can delete them. And then we'll keep them for the past 2 years monthly versions. You can set these however you like. This is a feature that every single business should have on every single shared folder that they have. The question is, how long do you want to keep them? And we're going to make them visible right here. So now let's say somebody comes in here and encrypts my entire Google Drive. So right here, this is my Google Drive backup that I did for a different video. And let's say that somebody goes in and encrypts it. So this virus is very simple. It's very common to have a crypto virus. All it does is it just searches the network for every single file that is not critical. So it won't encrypt something that will kill the system because it can't spread anymore. Instead, what it'll do is it'll find every single file that is non-critical and keeps encrypting it. Encrypts every single one of them, but it doesn't delete them. Instead, it just modifies them to be encrypted. So that means that it never ends up in a recycling bin. I'm not doing it here properly, but this is essentially what occurs. Every single one of your folders and files essentially gets encrypted with an encryption key that only the attacker has. And the way they actually set up is every single attackee gets a different encryption key that is all signed by one encryption key. So they can generate multiple decryption keys that only work per attack. So they are very sophisticated attacks that are actually not that hard to deploy, that leave businesses really, really, really vulnerable. So this is an attack that happens generally over an SMB file server. X, Y, and Z person from HR clicks a bad link that installs a virus on their computer. And what it does is outside of business hours, while it's on, it just encrypts files slowly. Some of them will even start with encrypting older files first to go undetected for as long as possible. It just recursively is encrypting everything, and you end up one day opening up your file server and you see everything that looks like this. File name and then look for Bitcoin or something like that. And there's no way to decrypt these files. All right, so now let's say that this ransomware attack has occurred. And this is what you'd normally see. We also see it's the exact same way that we'd see it right here, is essentially just over SMB, which is the way you connect with Windows File Explorer and macOS Finder. That is exactly how this attack normally takes place. And this is the most common type of ransomware. All it takes is one user who doesn't even have that high level of access, no admin access required, to start encrypting and wreaking havoc on the vast majority of the file server. And so this right here is what they would see. And we can go ahead and use snapshots to protect this. Because let's go ahead and look at the most recent version. Oh, all of our files are right here exactly as they were. But I'm logged in with an administrator account. If I try to rename this or modify it at all, you can't, because the snapshots through Windows File Explorer are not able to be modified. Same thing with macOS Finder. You can't modify these snapshots at all, not through Windows File Explorer SMB. And so it's easy enough to just go back to here, and we're just going to go into our recovery tab and just roll back the clock. We're just going to go ahead and roll back to exactly as it was. And nice enough, they will take a snapshot before restoring. And this is literally going to just turn back the clock exactly as it was when that snapshot was taken. So we just refresh over here, and all of our files are back exactly as they were. Here, Windows client, we just have to come back in, and it'll be a second of instability there. But once Finder recovers, it'll have all the data on in there. And just like that, we are back up and running. Funny enough there, I accidentally restored user settings and I was messing around. Long story, and I didn't have permission. But that is all it takes, and it is just that easy to recover. And by far the best part about this is how fast it is. You absolutely should have immutable offsite backup. But offsite backups are designed for disaster recovery. They're designed to make sure that no matter what happens, you've got your files. This is a great stopgap place to be able to recover your files in 99% of cases. Everything but hardware failure, this is where you can recover your files. And when you're recovering them, if you're using it as your file server, you can recover them nearly instantly. The great thing about snapshots are, it takes the same few seconds to restore a 50 megabyte folder as it does to restore a 10 terabyte, 100 terabyte folder, as long as it's the entire shared folder. That's because data never has to move on disk when you're restoring from snapshots. And so it is just that easy to set up and use snapshots and recover from them. And what we just talked about there is the standard snapshot. We have not gone into the immutable snapshots yet. With immutable snapshots, we take it actually a layer further, and now not even the administrator can delete them. So if we look right here, I can delete some of these snapshots. So I can delete all the snapshots that are older than 7 days. I just can come into our snapshots list. And hey, let's go ahead and just clear these guys out. That's totally fine. But if I try to do the same thing on one of these immutable snapshots, I cannot. And if we hover over it, we see it's got a time remaining of about 14 hours. I'm signed in with an administrator account and I cannot touch these at all. Well, let's go ahead and just say we're an adversary and this is their backup system. Let's wipe their entire backup system. Let's go ahead and we'll delete the entire shared folder. Nope, we cannot delete the shared folder because, as I said earlier, there are immutable snapshots. Well, let's go ahead and just wipe it with deleting the storage pool. More immutable snapshots. I can't delete it there. Now let's try completely factory resetting this thing. Whoops, still cannot. I have yet to find a way that you can beat this. This clock also shuts down when the NAS is not running. So it is not like you can go in and change the date time and boom, now it's up. The only way that you can beat this is to have physical access to NAS, shut it down, pull it out, stick it in a Linux box, and format each of the drives individually. And if they've got physical access, we've got bigger problems. So essentially, immutable snapshots cover every single attack method that does not require physical access to the device, including over SSH. I've yet to see a single attack that allows you to remove a volume with immutable snapshots. And now we can see the whole picture of why Synologies are ransomware beasts. Because we can pair those immutable snapshots with everything. We can pair it with your active backup for business, your virtual machine backups. Immutable snapshots. So even if they uninstall active backup for business, you can still recover all that data. Same thing for your backup of your Windows file server. If somebody gets access to your domain controller and has root access to all the machines on your network, even those people with root access cannot delete immutable snapshots on Synology DSM until their timer has expired. And so if you're doing a file server backup and somebody goes through and they've got access to the domain controller and they've got therefore basically root access to anything under the world they want, even they will not be able to delete the immutable snapshots for 7 or 14 days, however long you set it. And that is the true power of this setup and why immutable snapshots pair so nicely. Now, I do want to say immutable snapshots are not for everybody because they are immutable. That means that if you're tinkering and messing around and you want to undo it, you have to wait that clock out. There's no way around it. I've had consulting calls where it's like, yep, sorry, to implement this because we want to reformat it as RAID 5 instead of RAID 10. You're going to have to wait 7 to 14 days because you've got immutable snapshots. So they are not for everyone. Especially, I don't like setting up for video production houses because video production houses absolutely love to chew through data. But for a business that wants a very, very, very strong backup plan for an on-site unit, it's hard to beat Synologies for that reason. So many attacks that devastate systems happen because somebody gets access to a domain account that has admin privileges. And then from there, you can run through the entire network because everything's linked to Active Directory. And so that is the incredible power of immutable snapshots on Synology. Even if you don't need them immutable, having just regular snapshots can be a huge send for ransomware and just accidental deletes and things like that. And so that's where I want to finish this video. There are a ton of awesome things that can save you a lot of money and get awesome backups for larger businesses without having to pay recurring license fees. That's going to be it for this tutorial. Go and leave any other questions for me down in the comments below. And if you want to hire me, there's a link for that down in the description below. All right, have a good one. Bye.